Hey guys, tonight we travel back to a time when waking up on the wrong side of the bed meant rolling into a cowbed. We're going to spend a long, dark night in the mind of a medieval peasant to feel, just for a little while, the relentless, grinding reality of their existence. Your world is about to shrink to a single drafty room, your diet to a single pot of gruel, and your ambitions to simply seeing the next sunrise. This isn't a fantasy kingdom with charming farm folk and benevolent rulers. This is the grit, the grime, and the daily struggle. Frankly, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. It's always fascinating to see where these stories land. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you're aware of isn't a sound or a sight. It's a smell. It's a thick, complex bouquet that is soaked into the very fabric of your life. It's the damp, peaty scent of the packed earth floor beneath you, the sharp tang of animal manure, and the sweet, cloying smell of old straw. Layered over it all is the ghostly aroma of 1,000 previous fires, a permanent, choking incense of wood smoke that clings to your hair, your clothes, and the back of your throat. You are not yet awake, but you are already breathing in your home. Your eyes open to a darkness so complete it feels like a physical weight. There are no windows here, not in the way we think of them. There might be a single, shuttered slit in the wall, but it's closed tight against the night's chill. The only light is the faint, ruby-red memory of embers glowing in the central hearth, a tiny spark of life in the oppressive black. Slowly, shapes begin to ghost their way into existence as your eyes adjust. You can make out the low, curved timbers that frame your world. This is a cruck house, a common peasant dwelling, built from two massive, bent wooden beams that meet at the roof's peak, creating an A-frame shape. The walls are little more than a flimsy screen of woven sticks, a technique called wattle, smeared with a mix of wet soil, clay, and animal dung to keep the worst of the wind out. It's called daub. Wattle and daub. It sounds almost charming, like a cottage in a storybook. It isn't. A soft, wet snort echoes beside you, and you feel a warm, grassy breath wash over your face. That would be Daisy, the family cow. She is your most prized possession, and she lives here with you. In the single, smoke-filled room that is your entire world, you sleep alongside your family and your livestock. Your two small children are huddled against your spouse on one side, and the cow is tethered just a few feet away on the other. A few chickens might be roosting in the rafters above, and if you were slightly more prosperous, a pig might be grunting softly in a corner. Historians still argue whether bringing the animals inside was purely for their security, to prevent theft, or if it was a deliberate strategy to use their body heat to survive the freezing winters. Honestly, as you lie here feeling the ambient warmth from a 1,000-pound herbivore, you don't much care about the academic debate. You're just grateful not to be frozen solid. It's the original central heating system, just a bit smellier and prone to mooing at inconvenient hours. Your bed is a sack, a palliasse, stuffed with straw and whatever else is soft enough. It lies directly on the cold, damp floor. If you don't have a sack, you just have a pile of straw. It's scratchy. It rustles with every tiny movement, a sound that is soon joined by the rustle of other, smaller residents. Fleas, lice, and other biting insects are not a nuisance. They are a fundamental part of your existence. You've been bitten so many times in your life that you barely notice the new welts anymore. It's less of a bed and breakfast, more of a flambé. You are bound to this land, this village, this hovel. The house you're sleeping in? It isn't yours. The small plot of land it sits on, the toft, and the garden patch behind it, the croft, all belong to the lord of the manor. You are a serf, and your dwelling is part of the deal, part of your obligation. A quirky and rather grim indicator of a peasant family's relative wealth was the number and type of animals they could afford to shelter inside. A cow is a sign of some stability. A pig, even better. Poorer families might only have a few chickens to their name. They're clucking a constant reminder of their precarious place in the world. There is no alarm clock, no gentle nudging from a partner. You wake because the faintest hint of gray has begun to seep through the smoke hole in the thatched roof, or because the village's alpha rooster has finally decided to announce the coming day. Your body, tuned to the rhythms of the sun and seasons, knows it's time. The first conscious thought is of the cold. The fire has died down to its last breath, and a damp chill has settled deep into your bones. Every muscle in your body aches from yesterday's labor, a dull, familiar pain that serves as your personal welcome to the morning. Slowly, you push yourself up from the straw. The air is frigid. You sleep in your only set of clothes, a rough, woolen tunic that feels perpetually damp and itchy against your skin. The first task, before all others, is to coax the fire back to life. You crawl on your hands and knees over to the central hearth, a shallow pit lined with a few stones. You gently blow on the embers, your breath a small, white cloud in the glow. You add twigs, then larger pieces of wood you gathered yesterday. It's a slow, delicate process. Failure means a cold, dark, and miserable start to a day that will likely only go downhill from there. But the embers catch. A tiny flame flickers, then another. It grows, pushing back the darkness and the cold, casting dancing shadows against the smoky walls of your home. The day has not yet broken, but your work has already begun. With the fire reborn, you turn your attention to the single most important object in your home after the cow, the cauldron. It's a lump of soot-blackened iron, hanging from a hook over the flames, and it is never truly empty. This pot contains your past, present, and future meals all at once. Inside, the remains of last night's dinner have congealed into a thick, lukewarm sludge. This isn't a problem. It's the starter pack for today's culinary adventure. You grab a wooden bucket of water, which you hauled from the village well yesterday evening, and slosh a generous amount into the pot. The water is murky, and you try not to think about what might be floating in it. Next comes a scoop of coarse ground oats from a sack in the corner. This is the foundation of your diet, not wheat. That fine grain is for the Lord's table and the bread of your betters. You eat the rough stuff, oats, barley, and rye, grains that can survive harsher weather and poorer soil. This concoction is pottage, the defining meal of your existence. It's a sort of perpetual stew, a thrifty, never-ending process of culinary reincarnation. You simply add new ingredients to whatever was left over from the day before. It's been simmering, in one form or another, for days, maybe weeks. It's an efficient system, wringing every last drop of sustenance from your meager supplies with minimal fuel. As you stir the pot with a large wooden spoon, the new water and oats blend with the ghosts of yesterday's leeks and peas. The smell that rises is familiar. It's the only smell, besides smoke and manure, that your kitchen ever produces. It's not an unpleasant smell, exactly, just deeply, profoundly uninteresting. It's the smell of survival. Your family begins to stir now, roused by the gentle bubbling of the pot and the growing light. They don't complain or greet the day with cheer. They simply rise, scratch, and wordlessly find their places around the hearth, extending their hands to the growing warmth. Your spouse might add a few more chopped vegetables to the pot from a small pile gathered from your croft, that little garden plot you tend so carefully. A handful of wrinkly peas, a limp-looking cabbage leaf, maybe a precious onion, chopped roughly with a small, worn knife. There is no talk of recipes or variety. You eat what the season gives you, and you are grateful for it. In the spring, it might be wild garlic and young nettles. In the autumn, it's turnips and beans. Right now, it's the tail end of the winter stores, and the pickings are slim. You wish you could add a chunk of meat, a bit of salted pork to give it flavor and richness. But meat is a luxury you can rarely afford. The forest is full of game, deer, boar, rabbits, but they belong to the Lord. To be caught poaching, setting a snare for a rabbit to feed your children, could mean a hefty fine, a flogging, or even the loss of a hand. So the pottage remains meatless, unless a sick chicken finally gives up the ghost, or you manage to catch a squirrel without being seen. Sometimes, for flavor, you might drop in a piece of bacon rind, letting it boil until every last molecule of smoky, fatty essence has been leached into the grayish broth. When the stew is hot and bubbling, breakfast is served. You don't have individual bowls. Instead, you might use a communal wooden bowl, or you'll employ a quirky piece of medieval tableware, the trencher. This is essentially a thick slice of old, stale bread, usually dark and dense rye bread, which functions as your plate. You ladle the thick pottage directly onto the bread. It's the original edible container and a brilliant piece of no-waste technology. You eat the pottage first, using a rough wooden spoon or your fingers, and then, once the stew is gone, you can eat the gravy-soaked trencher itself. If you were a guest at a noble's feast, the leftover trenchers would be collected and given as alms to the poor. Down here at the bottom of the ladder, you are the poor, so you're definitely not giving your bread away. You all eat in relative silence, hunched near the fire. The taste is exactly what you expect. It's bland, earthy, and filling. Sometimes it's watery and thin, other times so thick with barley that your spoon could stand upright in it. There are no spices, no salt beyond what might have been in a piece of preserved rind. It is fuel, not cuisine. You chew slowly, methodically. You can feel the grit in the bread, tiny particles of stone from the Lord's mill where your grain was ground. To wash it down, you drink water, or, more likely, small ale. This is a weak, low-alcohol beer. The brewing process kills most of the dangerous microbes found in the local water source, making it a safer option for everyone, even the children. It's basically water that's been given a mild safety certification and a slight yeasty flavor. Historians still argue whether the medieval peasant diet was one of wretched deficiency or surprising resilience. On one hand, the lack of variety and an almost vegetarian existence could lead to stunted growth and a constant battle for calories. On the other hand, some scholars propose that this diet, rich in whole grains, fiber, and legumes, may have inadvertently protected peasants from some of the chronic health issues that plagued the meat and sugar-gorging nobility. You, however, are not interested in the long-term health benefits of a fiber-rich diet. You are interested in the gnawing emptiness in your stomach, an emptiness the pottage never quite fills. It just pads the walls for a few hours. The meal is over in minutes. The pot is left by the fire, ready to be topped up for the midday meal. There are no dishes to wash, save for wiping the spoons on your tunic. The brief, quiet ritual of breakfast is done. Now, fueled by tasteless gruel and weak beer, you and your family must face the real reason you exist: to work. You pull on your worn leather shoes, if you have them, and push open the creaking wicker and hide door of your hovel, stepping out into the cold, gray dawn. You step out into the village proper, and the air immediately changes. The private, concentrated smells of your own hovel are replaced by the public, communal smells of everyone else's. Wood smoke hangs like a thick fog in the still, pre-dawn air, mingling with the ever-present odor of mud and manure. The path through the village isn't a path, it's a shared space of trampled earth, perpetually churned by the hooves of animals and the tread of human feet. Other families are emerging from their identical homes, spectral figures in the gray light, all moving with the same slow, deliberate gait. There are no cheerful greetings, no lively chatter. There is only a shared, unspoken understanding of the task ahead. You are all walking towards the fields. As you leave the cluster of huts behind, the landscape opens up into vast, unfenced tracts of land. This is the heart of the manor, and the source of its wealth. Your wealth, too, such as it is. You see, the land is divided into enormous fields, and within them, you can just make out a patchwork of long, narrow strips. This is the open field system, and it's the physical map of your obligations. A core innovation of the time, the three-field system, governs this entire landscape. One massive field lies fallow, resting for the year to regain its strength. Another was planted last autumn with wheat or rye, the grains that make the fine bread for the Lord's table. The third field, the one you're walking towards today, is for the spring planting of oats and barley, the stuff of your pottage and small ale. This rotation is a clever way to keep the soil from becoming exhausted, a mainstream historical fact that, while brilliant in theory, means a third of your potential farmland is always out of use. Before you can even think about the small, scattered strips of land that are assigned to your family, you must work the Lord's land. This is the domain, the best, most fertile, and most well-drained section of the manor. Your labor on his land is the primary rent you pay for your existence. You and the other men from the village converge on a colossal, heavy-wheeled plow, a technological marvel that looks more like a siege engine than a farming tool. It's far too expensive for any single peasant to own, so it's either owned by the village collectively or, more likely, it belongs to the Lord. A team of 8 lumbering oxen is already yoked to it, their breath pluming in the cold air. Your job today is on the plow team. Perhaps you are the plowman, wrestling with the 2 handles at the back to keep the iron plowshare cutting a straight line through the damp, heavy soil. Or perhaps you're the drover, walking alongside the oxen, goading them with a long stick and a rhythmic, monotonous chant of encouragement. Papa! Rock! Get up now. It's a hypnotic, strangely intimate communication with the beasts. In a way, you have more in common with these oxen than with the Lord in his castle. You both serve the same purpose, to toil until you can toil no more. The work is brutal. Each step is a struggle as the cold mud tries to steal your shoes. The plow lurches and screeches, its wooden frame groaning under the stray. When the share hits a hidden rock, a jarring shock travels up the frame, through your arms, and into your teeth. You lean your whole body into the effort, your muscles screaming in protest, keeping the furrow straight, turning the dark, rich earth over, hour after hour. The sun, your only clock, begins its long, slow arc across the sky. The work does not stop. The only break comes at midday, when you pause for a few minutes to eat a hunk of the same dark, gritty bread you had for breakfast, washed down with ale from a leather flask. You don't return to the village. You eat right there, sitting on the damp ground you've just plowed, looking out at the endless brown furrow stretching out behind you, in the equally endless stretch of unplowed land ahead. It's the bleakest lunch break imaginable. Historians still argue whether the slow, steady ox was better than the faster, more energetic horse for this kind of work. Oxen were cheaper to buy and feed, subsisting on pasture and hay, and their sheer power was ideal for breaking up heavy, clay soil. Horses were quicker, meaning more land could be plowed in a day, but they were expensive and required a diet of oats, the very crop you were struggling to grow. The great horse versus ox debate is a lively one among academics, but for you it is meaningless. The Lord provides the animals. You provide the sweat. Whether it's an ox or a horse in front of you, your back will ache just the same. Your spouse and older children are here, too. They follow behind the plow, their own backs bent. They carry wooden mallets to break up the large, stubborn clods of earth the plow leaves in its wake. They might be scattering the precious seeds, or walking the freshly sown ground to scare off the crows who see your hard work as a personal buffet. It is a family activity, but one born of pure necessity. At the end of each long furrow, the team must stop and wheel the oxen and the cumbersome plow around to start a new line. This turning area is known as a headland. It's an awkward, trampled bit of ground, difficult to cultivate properly. As a quirky little historical footnote, these messy headlands often became miniature zones of peasant autonomy. Sometimes the Lord would permit you to plant a few extra rows of beans or peas for your own family in this otherwise wasted space. They were the margins, the literal edges of your rigid world, where a tiny bit of personal enterprise might just be possible. Finally, the sun begins to kiss the horizon, painting the sky in colors you are too exhausted to appreciate. Your day, which started in darkness, is ending in twilight. The work is done, for today. You unhitch the weary animals and begin the slow, aching walk back to the village. Every muscle burns. Your hands are raw. Your spirit is numb. You have spent the entire day carving a perfectly straight line in the earth, a testament to your obedience and toil. And you know, with a certainty that sinks deeper than any plowshare, that you will wake up and do it all again tomorrow. The walk home from the fields is a slow, silent procession of exhausted bodies. The communal energy of the morning's plow team has dissolved, leaving only the private ache in your own muscles. In your hand, you carry a heavy wooden spade. It's not the Lord's magnificent iron plow. This tool is yours. Or, more accurately, it's your family's. Its weight is both a burden and a comfort, a direct link between your labor and your survival. When you finally reach your hovel, you don't just drop it by the door. You have a ritual. You take a moment to scrape the thickest mud from its surface with a stick, then lean it carefully in its designated spot just inside the door. These tools are your most valuable possessions. They are, in a very real sense, your partners in a life of toil. You don't own a vast collection of implements. You have what is essential, and nothing more. Besides the spade, there is a hand hoe for the endless task of weeding your garden plot. There's a wooden pitchfork, its tines fire-hardened, for moving hay and straw. And then there are the harvest tools, waiting silently for their season. You run a callous thumb over the curved, serrated blade of a sickle. It's used for reaping grain, a task done bent over, grabbing a handful of stalks and slicing them with a swift, practiced motion. For mowing hay, there is the long, elegant, and terrifyingly sharp scythe, a tool that requires a flowing, rhythmic grace to use effectively and a moment's inattention to cause a grievous injury. These blades are your family's hedge against starvation. Perhaps your most important possession of all is your axe. It leans near the hearth, its handle worn smooth and dark from decades of use. It was your father's, and his father's before him. The axe is your universal problem solver. It fells the small trees and cuts the fallen branches you're permitted to gather for firewood, a rite known as estover. It splits logs for the hearth, helps in the crude butchering of a pig, sharpens a stake for a fence, and could, in the direst of circumstances, serve as a weapon. It's a symbol of your constant, grinding effort to carve a survivable existence out of the wilderness that always seems to be pressing in at the edges of your village. These tools are not shiny or efficient. They are heavy, crude, and profoundly uncomfortable to use. The concept of ergonomics is centuries away. These feel like they were designed to cause maximum fatigue, a mainstream historical fact that dictated your entire material world was the immense cost of iron. Metal was a strategic resource, used for swords, armor, and the Lord's fancy gate hinges. For a peasant, owning an object made entirely of iron was almost unthinkable. Your spade isn't a solid piece of steel, it's a wooden spade, but it has been shod-fitted with a precious, U-shaped iron tip to give it a durable cutting edge. This makes it vastly more effective than a simple wooden shovel, and also vastly more valuable. When your grandfather wrote his will, he didn't leave behind land or money. He left one pot, one axe, and one shod spade, and this was considered a significant inheritance. Because of this, you rely on a lot of wood. One of your most used and quirkiest tools is the beetle. It's nothing more than a giant wooden mallet with a long handle, a brutally simple device. You use the beetle for everything. You use it to hammer and fence posts around your croft. You use it to break up the same stubborn clods of earth we saw in the fields yesterday. You might even use it to tamp down the dirt floor of your own hovel to make it more level. It is the embodiment of low-tech, high-impact solutions. It's a tool for applying brute force, and in your world, brute force is often the only answer available. Caring for these tools is a constant, low-level chore. After a day's work, you might spend a few moments by the fire sharpening a blade on a whetstone, the rhythmic shing-shing-shing a soft counterpoint to the crackling fire. You check the wooden handles for splinters, rewrap a leather binding on your flail, the tool used for threshing grain, and guard them jealously. To break a tool through carelessness is a catastrophe. It could mean falling into debt with the village blacksmith, a man who holds considerable power because of his mastery over precious metal. A broken spade could mean a less productive garden, which in turn means less food in the pottage pot. The profound scarcity of these items leads to a debate that historians still ponder. What was the greater obstacle to a peasant's prosperity? Was it the crushing burden of labor owed to the Lord, leaving you too little time and energy to properly work your own strips of land? Or was it the simple lack of good equipment? Could you have been more productive, grown more food, if only you'd had a better spade, a sharper scythe, or if iron wasn't so ludicrously expensive? It's a chicken and egg question of poverty. Do you lack good tools because you're poor? Or are you poor because you lack good tools? As you bank the fire for the night and prepare to collapse onto your straw pallet, you glance one last time at the collection of wood and worn metal leaning in the corner. They are not just objects. They're your legacy, your burden, and your only means of survival. They're the silent, inanimate members of your family, waiting patiently in the dark for the sun to rise, so you can pick them up and begin the struggle all over again. As you lie there on your scratchy straw pallet, the day's ache settling deep into your bones, a thought drifts through your mind. You think of your spade, your axe, your hovel. These things feel like they are yours. They are the landscape of your life. But as you stare up into the smoky darkness, you are aware of a heavier, more fundamental truth. You do not even own yourself. You are a serf. The word itself might not be one you use, but the reality of it is as inescapable as the turning of the seasons. You are not a slave, not in the way that one person can be bought and sold at a market like a sack of grain. It's more complicated, and in some ways, more insidious than that. You are legally tied to the land you were born on. Ad scriptis glebe, the learned clerks would write it, bound to the soil. This means that if your lord, the noble who holds this manor, decides to sell this tract of land to another lord, you are part of the transaction. You, your family, your neighbors, the hovel you sleep in, the very ground beneath you, it all gets transferred to a new owner, like the barns and the woodland and the livestock. You are a feature of the property, an asset listed on a deed you will never see. You cannot decide to pack up your meager belongings and seek a better life in the next town, or even on the next manor. To leave without the Lord's express permission is a crime. You would be a fugitive, hunted down and dragged back to face punishment. You are trapped not by walls or fences, but by a web of law and custom that is as strong as iron. This system, the manorial system, is presented as a kind of bargain. It's a protection scheme, really. The Lord, with his knights and his stone castle on the hill, offers you protection from the horrors of the wider world, from bandits, rogue soldiers, or invading armies. In return for this protection, you provide him with everything he needs to live his life of leisure and violence. It's the original subscription service, but the cancellation terms are, let's say, a little strict. The primary payment is your labor. Remember that back-breaking day spent plowing the Lord's personal fields, his domain? That wasn't you being a good neighbor. That was corvée labor, a tax paid in sweat and exhaustion. For 2, 3, sometimes 4 days a week, your time is not your own. You must show up and work his land, harvest his crops, dredge his ditches, and repair his fences before you can even think about tending to the small strips of land that you rely on to feed your own family. The Lord's heavy hand intrudes upon the most personal aspects of your life. Do you wish to marry the person you love from the neighboring village? You can't, unless the Lord grants permission. Since that marriage would mean your spouse, and more importantly your future children, would now belong to a different manor, your Lord will only agree if a hefty fee is paid, a fine called a foremarriage. He has a direct financial interest in your choice of life partner. Your children are his future workforce, and he guards that resource jealously. And then there is death. When your father died, the Lord's reeve, his manager and enforcer, came to your hovel. He wasn't there to offer condolences. He was there to collect the Harriet. This was the Lord's right. a death tax claiming the most valuable animal your family owned. In your case, it was your father's only ox, the key to plowing your family strips. This single, brutal custom was a brilliant piece of social engineering, ensuring that with the death of every family head, the next generation was immediately impoverished, weakened, and forced to go into debt to the manor just to survive. After the Harriet was taken, your older brother then had to pay an entry fine simply for the privilege of taking over your father's tenancy on the land. You don't inherit your life. You have to pay to renew the lease on it. Historians still argue whether the primary goal of serfdom was economic exploitation or social control. Was this intricate system of rules and obligations designed purely to squeeze the maximum amount of wealth out of the land and the people who worked it? Or was it more about maintaining a rigid, unchangeable social order, keeping the peasantry bound, immobile, and powerless to prevent any challenge to the nobility's status? From where you're lying, on your lumpy bed of straw, the distinction is purely academic. You don't know if you're being exploited or controlled. You just know that the reeve is always watching, that the Lord's castle on the hill seems to cast a shadow over every part of your life, and that your muscles ache from working a field that will never be yours. You are not free. You cannot walk away. You cannot choose your own path. Your world is a tiny village, a few vast fields, and a church. Your future is to walk that same path every day, work those same fields, and eventually be buried in that same churchyard. The Lord's hand isn't just heavy, it's omnipresent. It rests on your shoulder when you wake, guides your hands as you toil, and tucks you into a bed of obligations at night. The weight of it is the last thing you feel as you drift off into a shallow, restless sleep. Another day begins. As the first light filters through the smoke hole, the familiar aches in your body remind you of the labor that awaits. But today, the feeling is different. It's not the dull resignation of working the Lord's domain. Today you will work your own family strips of land. A flicker of something that might almost be pride or motivation sparks within you. This is the food that will, hopefully, see you through the winter. This work is for you. But the spark dies almost as quickly as it appears, smothered by the cold certainty of what is to come. For you know that even when you work for yourself, you are never truly working for yourself. The first and greatest tax on your life is the one you pay with your time, the corvée labor that feeds the Lord directly from your sweat. But the extraction doesn't end there. After you have given the Lord your strongest days, you must then give Him a hefty portion of the product from your weakest ones. Today is harvest day on your own strips. You and your family work with a desperate intensity, swinging your sickles, gathering the sheaves of barley. The sun beats down, your back screams, but you push through, because every stop counts. By the end of the day, you have a small, precious mound of grain, the culmination of a year's worth of worry and toil. You stand back, breathing heavily, and allow yourself a moment of satisfaction. That's when the reeve arrives. He doesn't hurry. He walks with the slow, deliberate confidence of a man who knows he has all the power. He is here to collect the Lord's rent in kind. This isn't a bill you can pay later. He is here to take his share now, before this grain ever reaches your hovel. With a critical eye, he surveys your pile of sheaves, then proceeds to measure out the Lord's portion. It's a huge chunk. A quarter, a third, sometimes even half of your entire harvest, depending on the local custom. You watch in silence as the fruits of your labor, the food meant for your children's mouths, are loaded onto a cart destined for the Lord's massive storehouse. There is nothing you can do. It is His right. Your heart sinks. The pile that remains looks terrifyingly small. But the cart isn't the only one you have to fill. Another obligation looms, one draped in the sacred authority of God Himself. You owe a tithe to the church. This is a mainstream historical fact of life, as certain as sunrise and sunset. The word tithe literally means a tenth, and you are expected to give 10% of everything you produce to the local parish. It's not just your grain. It's every 10th egg your chickens lay, every 10th bundle of wool you shear from your sheep, the 10th fish you catch, the 10th cheese you make. The parish priest, a man who holds the keys to your eternal salvation, is also your tax man. As you set aside yet another portion of your precious grain for the tithe barn, you might wonder about the nature of this payment. Historians still argue whether the average peasant genuinely and piously believed in the religious necessity of the tithe, seeing it as a sacred duty to support God's work on earth. Or if they secretly resented it as just another tax levied by another powerful authority. Did you hand over that sack of barley with a prayer in your heart? Or with a curse under your breath, paying only out of fear of social ostracism and eternal damnation? You probably feel a bit of both. You fear God, but you also fear winter. The demands don't stop there. As you're calculating what little remains, you see your neighbor trudging toward the reeve, holding a few silver pennies, his head bowed. His daughter is getting married. For this, he must pay the Lord a fee known as the merchet. This quirky, and frankly demeaning, tax is a payment for the Lord's permission for a serf's daughter to marry. Some scholars theorize it originated as a fine to compensate the Lord for the loss of his right to the woman's virginity, though it was more practically about him losing a valuable worker from his manor's labor pool. It's a stark reminder that the Lord's financial interests extend into every corner of your life, right down to the bodies and futures of your children. And then there is the specter of the tallage. This is the most feared tax of all, for it is entirely arbitrary. If the Lord needs to raise a dowry for his daughter, if he wants to go on a crusade, or if he simply feels his coffers are a bit light, he can impose a tallage on his peasants. It is a demand for cash, a commodity you barely ever see or touch, and it is non-negotiable. The constant, low-level dread that the Lord might demand a tallage at any moment makes it impossible to ever feel secure, to ever feel like you might get ahead. You are the base of a pyramid, and your wealth flows in only one direction, up. Your labor, your grain, your animals, your money, it is all siphoned away to support the lifestyles of lords and priests who do not sweat in the fields. You look at what is left of your harvest. This small, sad pile of grain. This is it. This has to feed you, your spouse, and your children through the long, dark, cold months of winter. It is not enough. It is never enough. And as you hoist a sack onto your aching back to begin the walk home, you are crushed by the mathematical certainty of your life. You work, they take. You stare at the sack of grain in your hovel. It is the pitifully small remainder of your harvest, the net profit from a year of toil after the Lord's share and God's share have been taken. Now, the simple, universal human desire to turn that grain into bread presents you with a new set of obstacles. Every step of the process is another opportunity for your Lord to dip his hand into your pocket. These are the Banalites, the Lord's monopolies on essential services, and they form the bars of a subtle economic prison. You are about to pay for your food all over again. Your first problem is turning your barley or rye into flour. In your hovel, perhaps hidden under a pile of rags in the corner, is your most seditious secret, a cornstone. It's a simple device, two circular stones, one on top of the other, that you can turn by hand to grind small amounts of grain. It is also completely illegal. The Lord has decreed that all tenants of his manor must use his official mill. This quirky and infuriating prohibition isn't for your benefit. It's to protect his monopoly. To be found with a cornstone is to be accused of theft, stealing profit from the Lord, and you will be dragged before the manorial court and fined heavily. So, with a sigh of resignation, you heave the heavy sack of grain onto your back and begin the long walk to the Lord's mill. You hear it before you see it, the rhythmic creak and splash of the water wheel and the deep, rumbling groan of the massive millstones grinding against each other. The mill is one of the most technologically advanced and impressive buildings in your world. It is also a place of deep suspicion. The miller, the man who operates this machinery, is the Lord's man. He is often one of the few relatively prosperous commoners in the village, and he is widely believed to be a thief. You greet him with a forced deference, handing over your precious sack. His payment is called multure, a toll taken directly from your grain. You watch like a hawk as he scoops out his portion before grinding the rest. His scoop always seems to be generously heaped. His thumb, as the saying goes, is golden from pressing down on the scales. Historians still argue about the miller's notorious reputation. Was he a folkloric villain, a convenient scapegoat for peasants to channel their resentment against the system? Or was this stereotype rooted in the reality of widespread, petty theft? It's a debate about character versus circumstance. You don't have the luxury of academic distance. You just know that the flour you receive back is lighter than the grain you brought, and you have no power to question the transaction. The miller's power comes from the Lord's law, and his mill is the only game in town. Now you trudge home with your slightly lighter sack of flour. You mix it with water from your questionable bucket and knead it into a dense, heavy dough. You are ready to bake. But where? Building an oven in your own flammable Waterland dog hovel is forbidden, and for once, there's a decent safety reason for it. But the primary reason, as always, is profit. You are required to use the Lord's communal oven. This is another of the Banalites. You must take your carefully prepared dough to a central bakehouse managed by the Lord's baker. This is a logistical nightmare. The oven is only fired up on specific days, so you must time your baking to the Lord's schedule, not your own family's needs. You arrive to find a queue of other women and men from the village, all holding their own lumps of dough, all waiting their turn. The air is warm and filled with the one genuinely good smell your village produces, that of baking bread, but it's soured by the mood of weary obligation. When it's finally your turn, you hand your dough over to be placed in the massive, hot cavern of the oven. And, of course, you must pay for the privilege. The fee might be a small coin, if you have one. More likely, the payment is one or two of your finished loaves. Yes, after all this, you have to give the Lord a piece of the very bread you've just baked. It's a multi-level system of extraction that would make a modern tax authority blush. Finally, you walk home carrying your finished product. You hold a loaf of dark, dense, heavy bread. It feels warm in your hands, but you can't help but think of its true cost. The price of this single loaf is staggering. It includes the sweat of your corvée labor. It includes the huge portion of your harvest taken as rent. It includes the 10% tithe given to the church. It includes the miller's greedy scoop of multure. And it includes the loaf you had to leave behind at the bakehouse. This isn't just bread. It's a monument to your own subjugation. Every bite you take is a reminder of how the system is designed to grind you down, to process you, and to extract value from you at every possible turn, until there is almost nothing left. You hold the loaf of bread, this ridiculously expensive symbol of your life's work, and the sin of it fills your small hovel. It's a good smell, warm and wholesome, but it doesn't last. It's quickly swallowed by the permanent, foundational aromas of your home, a complex perfume of existence that a modern nose would find unbearable. This is because your world, from the floor beneath your feet to the sky above your head, is saturated with filth. It is a defining, inescapable fact of your life. You don't just live in it. You breathe it, you walk on it, and sometimes you accidentally drink it. Let's start with the floor of your one-room house. Remember, it's just packed earth. It can never be truly cleaned. Spills, spit, tracked and mud, and the occasional dropping from the family cow or the chickens roosting above are simply trampled down until they become part of the geology of your home. To make things slightly more comfortable, you cover this floor with rushes or straw. It's a temporary improvement. On the surface, it looks and smells fresh for a day or two. But underneath, a slow, disgusting science experiment is taking place. The scholar Erasmus, writing a few centuries after your time, described these floors perfectly. A bottom layer that can remain undisturbed for 20 years, hiding a collection of spittle, vomit, the urine of dogs and men, ale droppings, scraps of fish, and other abominations not fit to be mentioned. Your floor is a living compost pile of your own history. This rich, decomposing foundation is a paradise for your other roommates. We've mentioned the fleas and lice that live on your body, but your hovel is also a bustling metropolis for rats, mice, and countless other insects. They live in the thatched roof above your head, feasting on stored grain and nesting in the straw. They live in the walls and in the multi-layered filth of your floor. At night, you hear them scrabbling and squeaking, a constant reminder that you are never alone and that your meager food supply is always under siege. This isn't an infestation you can call an exterminator for. This is just the normal state of affairs. Now, let's talk about you. Personal hygiene as we know it is a fantasy. A full-body bath is an enormous, laborious undertaking. You would need to haul many buckets of water from the well, spend a huge amount of your precious firewood to heat it, and then try to wash in a cramped hovel with no privacy. It's a once or twice a year event, usually reserved for major holidays like Easter. Your daily washing routine consists of splashing your face and hands with a basin of cold, murky water. As for your clothes, you own one, maybe two, rough woolen tunics. You wash them by taking them to the local stream and beating them against a rock, maybe with a crude soap made from animal fat and lye if you're lucky. They are never truly clean, smell perpetually of wood smoke and damp wool, and take forever to dry. This raises a question that historians still argue about. Were medieval people simply oblivious to the dirt and smells, their senses so accustomed to it that they didn't mind? Or were they just as disgusted by it as we would be, but felt a deep sense of resignation because they lacked the knowledge and the resources to change their circumstances? You don't have a concept of germ theory, but you can certainly smell a rotting pile of garbage. You probably just accept it as part of the world's natural odor, a background hum of decay you've known since birth. Step outside your front door, and things only get worse. There are no sewers, no garbage trucks, no concept of public sanitation. Your street is a river of mud, churned with the manure of every animal in the village. Household waste, bones from your pottage, vegetable scraps, broken bits of pottery, gets tossed out the door or onto a communal garbage pile known as a midden. This rotting heap, a treasure trove for future archaeologists, is a festering, stinking landmark in your village, buzzing with flies and attracting rats. And what about human waste? There is no bathroom. You use a bucket in the corner of your hovel at night, and in the morning, its contents are unceremoniously tossed into the street or a nearby ditch. During the day, you find a secluded spot in your garden or behind a bush. This waste, along with the animal manure and the rotting garbage from the middens, inevitably gets washed by the rain into the very same streams and rivers that you use for drinking, cooking, and washing. You know instinctively that the clearest water comes from upstream, but the connection between waste and sickness is a mystery. For a quirky and earthy tidbit of daily life, your toilet paper is whatever nature provides, a handful of moss, a clump of leaves, or a smooth stone. It's a small, constant reminder of your complete reliance on the immediate environment for even the most basic needs. You live in a closed loop of contamination. The filth is not just an inconvenience or an aesthetic problem. It is the very medium in which you exist. It's in the water you drink, on the floor you sleep on, and the clothes you wear, and in the air you breathe. This pervasive, inescapable world of filth is more than just unpleasant. It is a breeding ground for disease, a constant environmental stress that weakens the body and primes it for the sickness that is inevitably to come. In a world soaked and saturated with filth, sickness is not a risk you run. It is a certainty you will face. It is the natural consequence of your environment. One day, you nick your hand with your sickle while harvesting. It's a small cut, nothing to worry about. But in a few days, it's not healing. Your hand is hot, swollen, and throbbing with a pain that climbs up your arm. A fever begins to bloom behind your eyes, and a chill settles into your bones that has nothing to do with the damp air of your hovel. You are now in a fight for your life, and your arsenal for this fight is terrifyingly primitive, a jumble of folk wisdom, desperate faith, and deeply flawed science. You have no access to a university-trained physician. Those men, with their long robes and their Latin books, are for kings and wealthy bishops. Your world of medicine is far more local and far more mysterious. Your first port of call is the village wise woman. She's an older lady who lives on the edge of the village, her hovel filled with the pungent, earthy smells of drying herbs. She is the keeper of generations of folk knowledge. You show her your angry, swollen hand. She tuts, her face a mask of concern, and gets to work. She might create a poultice of comfrey, an herb sometimes called knit bone for its supposed ability to heal wounds, and apply it to your hand, while muttering a charm to drive out the evil spirits that have taken root in your flesh. She will prescribe a tea made from willow bark to fight the fever, a genuinely useful remedy, since it contains a natural form of what will one day become aspirin. The line between medicine and magic here is non-existent. The herb is no good without the charm. The charm is useless without the herb. This leads to a debate that historians still ponder. Was this wise woman viewed as a respected healer, a vital part of the community's support system? Or was she a figure of fear, someone dabbling in witchcraft whose powers could turn malevolent at any moment? The truth is, she was both. When her cures worked, she was a blessing. When they failed, she was a prime suspect for blame, an easy scapegoat in a world that demanded simple answers for complex tragedies. Underpinning all of this is the official medical theory of your time, a concept inherited from the ancient Greeks, that has filtered down even to your village. This is the doctrine of the four humors, the mainstream medical fact of your age. The theory states that your body is composed of four liquids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Each is linked to an element and a quality. Blood is air, hot and moist. Phlegm is water, cold and moist. Yellow bile is fire, hot and dry. And black bile is earth, cold and dry. A healthy person has these four humors in perfect balance. Your fever and the hot swelling in your hand are clear signs of an excess of blood, too much hot and moist in your system. Every cure will be aimed at restoring that balance. The poultice and the willow bark tea aren't working. The fever is getting worse. Your next recourse is faith. Sickness is widely seen as a punishment for sin or a trial sent by God. You pray with a new, desperate intensity. You confess your sins to the parish priest, who admonishes you and tells you to trust in God's will. You might promise that if you survive, you will make a pilgrimage to a nearby shrine that holds the knuckle bone of a local saint. The presence of such a holy relic is believed to work miracles, and you cling to that hope as your body weakens. But your hand is now a swollen, useless club of pain. This requires a more hands-on approach. You must visit the barber surgeon. He is not a scholar, he is a craftsman. His trade is cutting hair and pulling teeth, but it also extends to minor surgeries, setting bones, and, most importantly, bloodletting. To deal with your excess of hot and moist blood, he needs to let some of it out. Before he begins, he might consult a quirky and rather amazing chart, the Zodiac Man. This was a diagram of the human body with each part linked to a sign of the zodiac. Your barber surgeon would check the current position of the moon and stars to ensure it was an auspicious day to treat your arm. Treating a limb when the moon is in the wrong sign would be courting disaster. It's astrology as a pre-op checklist. Once the stars are right, he gets out his lancet. With a swift, practiced motion, he opens a vein in your good arm, and your dark, precious blood flows into a bowl. He watches it, nodding sagely, letting what he deems to be the excess humor drain away, taking the sickness with it. Or perhaps he uses leeches, placing the slimy, squirming creatures on your skin and letting them drink their fill. You are left weak, pale, and dizzy from the blood loss, on top of the raging fever. You have been treated, but you have been significantly weakened in the process. You are carried back to your hovel and laid on your straw bed. You have done everything you can. You have used herbs and charms, prayers and relics, astrology and bloodletting. Now, there is nothing left. Your survival is in the hands of your own immune system, a complex biological engine you know nothing about. It must now fight a war on two fronts, against the raging infection in your body and against the debilitating effects of the cure. As you drift in and out of consciousness, you are a testament to the terrifying reality of medieval medicine, where the path to wellness was often more dangerous than the illness itself. You survive. By some miracle of your own constitution, despite the infection and despite the cure, the fever breaks. The swelling in your hand recedes, leaving behind scarred, tight skin. You are weak, thinner than before, but you are alive. The relief, however, is short-lived. It's replaced by a new kind of dread when the Reeve appears at your door. He isn't here to check on your health. He informs you that while you are lost in the fog of fever, Your pig escaped its pen and spent a delightful afternoon rooting through your neighbor's patch of prize-winning peas. You have been summoned to the manorial court. In this world, escaping sickness often just means you're well enough to stand trial. The court isn't held in a grand, stone building with blindfolded statues of justice. The very idea would be laughable. The manorial court, the primary legal institution in your life, convenes in the main hall of the Lord's manor house, or sometimes just outside under a great oak tree. Your Lord, or in his absence, his stony-faced steward, presides as judge. The jury is composed of a dozen other villagers, your neighbors, the same men you work alongside in the fields, the same people who know your pig and your neighbor and the flimsy state of your fence. This seems like a jury of your peers, but you know the truth. It's a group of men who are all keenly aware that their own prosperity depends on staying on the right side of the man who is acting as judge. You stand before them, hat in hand, heart pounding. There are no lawyers, no fancy legal arguments. Your neighbor, prodded by the reeve, states his case. He points a trembling finger at you and describes the devastation wrought upon his future pottage by your wandering swine. The reeve then confirms that you also missed 2 days of your required corvée labor duty or illness. You try to explain. You were sick. You were half dead. You couldn't keep the pig in or show up for work. The steward listens with an expression of profound boredom. Your excuses are irrelevant. The peas are ruined and the Lord's ditch was left undug. The jury then deliberates. This is a fascinating moment, and one that historians still argue about. Did this jury of peasants act as a genuine buffer, a grassroots check on the Lord's power, using their intimate local knowledge to ensure a fair and just outcome for their neighbors? Or were they merely a legal formality, a collection of terrified tenants who would rubber stamp whatever verdict the Lord or steward wanted, just to avoid drawing his anger towards themselves? You look at their faces, and you see them avoiding your gaze. You know they are deliberating your guilt. They are calculating the cost of defiance versus the cost of compliance. They mumble amongst themselves for a few moments before their foreman declares the predictable verdict. You are at fault. Now for the sentence. The primary purpose of the manorial court, a mainstream historical fact that colors its every action, is not justice. It is revenue generation and social control. The steward doesn't sentence you to repair your neighbor's fence. He sentences you to pay a fine for the damaged piece, a fine for the missed labor. Fines payable, of course, directly to the Lord. The court is a business, and your infractions are its inventory. It's a perfect system. The man who is wronged gets nothing, the man who did the wronging is made poorer, and the man who owns everything gets richer. As you stand there, contemplating how you will pay this crippling fine, another case is called. A young, unmarried woman from the village and her father are pushed forward. She is visibly pregnant. The reeve announces they are accused of violating the Lord's peace. They are there to answer for the fine known as lairwide. This was a penalty levied on a woman and her family for engaging in fornication. It's a quirky and deeply invasive rule. The justification was that her crime had damaged her value as a potential bride and, more importantly, had created a child outside of the structures of ownership and obligation that the Lord controlled. He was, in essence, fining her for unlicensed use of her own body. She and her father are forced to pay, their heads bowed in shame, adding more coins to the Lord's coffers. There is no appeal. There is no higher authority you can turn to. The king is a distant, mythical figure. The Lord's word here is absolute law. You might remember stories from your grandfather about the old ways, about trial by ordeal, where an accused person's guilt or innocence was revealed by God's judgment. They would be forced to carry a red-hot bar of iron or be thrown into a river. If the burn healed cleanly or if they sank and were quickly pulled out, they were innocent. The church put a stop to that practice over a century ago, but the spirit of it remains. Your fate is still in the hands of a power you cannot question or comprehend, only now that power is not God, but the Lord. You leave the court with your head spinning. You are physically weak from sickness, and now you are economically crippled by debt. The fines will be taken from your next harvest, or you will have to work even more days on the Lord's land to pay them off. This is how the system keeps you down. It is a web of obligations, and the court is the spider at its center, ready to wrap you in another layer of debt and despair the moment you make the slightest mistake. You push open the door to your hovel, the steward's condescending voice and the weight of the new fine still echoing in your mind. The smoky, familiar air of your home envelopes you. Your two small children look up from the floor where they're playing a game with stones, and your spouse turns from the pottage pot, their face etched with the same worry you feel. And that moment, the crushing weight of the manor, the Lord, and the court recedes, just for a second. It is replaced by the gravity of a different, more immediate reality. This small unit, this partnership, this family. In a world that seems designed to isolate you and grind you down, this is your only fortress. Your marriage was not the result of a whirlwind romance or a poetic courtship. For a peasant, marriage is first and foremost an economic partnership. A crucial business merger where the combined assets are two pairs of hands and a shared will to survive. You didn't look for a soulmate. You looked for a competent coworker. When you were younger, your parents and her parents saw the match. Your family had a strong ox. Her family had a reputation for hardy children and skillful weaving. It was a good trade. The goal was to create a new, self-sufficient household team, capable of meeting the manor's endless demands for labor and rent. Of course, even this most practical of unions was not yours to make freely. You had to get the Lord's permission. You had to go, cap in hand, to the reeve and formally request the right to marry, and your family had to pay the marchet fee for the privilege of taking her from her family's household into yours. Your wedding day was not a fairy tale. It was a brief church ceremony, where the priest blessed your union before God, followed by a small gathering where your neighbors shared what little ale and food could be spared. It was a public declaration of your new status, a new team officially on the field. This raises a question that historians and literary scholars still argue about. Did you, a medieval peasant, experience romantic love? The psalms the minstrels sing in the Lord's hall are full of chivalrous knights and their beautiful, unobtainable ladies. That is not your world. Your relationship is not built on flirtatious glances or secret love notes. It is built on the shared rhythm of waking in the cold dark, on the teamwork of hauling water and mending a fence, on the silent understanding that passes between you when the grain supply is running low. Some historians would say that romantic love is a later invention, a luxury for those who don't have to worry about starvation. Others believe the human heart is constant, and that love simply found a different way to express itself, a tougher, more resilient form. You don't know the theory. You just know that the sight of your spouse managing to stretch the pottage to feed one more mouth fills you with a feeling deeper and more powerful than any poet's verse. It's a love forged in hardship, not in leisure. In some places, there were quirky courtship customs like bundling. Here, a young couple, with the parents' permission, was allowed to spend the night in the same bed, but they were fully clothed and sometimes separated by a large wooden board, or had their legs tied in separate sacks. It was a way to allow for a night of conversation and intimacy, a chance to see if you were compatible, without, in theory, dishonoring the family. It was a strange, pragmatic test drive for a life of forced proximity. And your life is nothing if not proximate. The two of you, along with your children, share this single room, day in and day out. There is no privacy, no personal space. You know everything about each other, every sound, every smell, every mood. Your lives are a constant negotiation of a tiny shared world. Your labor is divided but equally vital. Your work is primarily foris familia, outside the home, the heavy labor of the fields, the plowing, the sowing, the harvesting. Your spouse's domain is intrafamilia, inside and around the hovel. They tend the precious vegetable croft, care for the chickens and the cow, spin wool into thread, mend your single tunic, prepare the food, and, of course, raise the children. Without their endless, grinding labor at home, your labor in the fields would be for nothing. You would starve. This partnership is the center of your universe. You are a team, a single unit fighting a defensive war against hunger, sickness, and the endless demands of the Lord. You may not speak of love, but it is there in every shared task and every sacrifice made, in the simple, profound act of continuing together for one more day. When the injustice of the manorial court makes you want to scream, it is the quiet, steady presence of your partner that pulls you back from the break. They're your anchor in a world trying to wash you away. Your family unit, your two-person fortress against the world, has a primary directive beyond mere survival. It must continue. It needs to produce the next generation of laborers to work your strips of land and, eventually, to take your place. And so, your spouse is pregnant. This is not a time of gentle repose or special treatment. A pregnancy is simply a state of being, and the work must go on. Your partner continues to haul water, tend the garden, and manage the hovel until the pains of labor finally force her to stop. The anxiety is a low, constant hum beneath the surface of your daily life, because you both know that what is about to happen is the most dangerous event in a woman's life. The birth does not take place in a special chamber or a sanitized room. It happens right here, in your hovel, on the same packed earth floor where your cow sleeps, by the same fire you use to cook your pottage. The air is thick with smoke, the straw bedding is teeming with pests, and the only water available is the same questionable water you use for everything else. It is an environment almost perfectly designed for infection. When the time comes, a call goes out, and a circle of women arrives. This is not a man's world. You are shuffled out of the hovel, left to pace anxiously outside, straining to interpret every sound. Inside, your spouse is attended by her gossips. The word sounds trivial to our ears, but it comes from an old term for a godparent or sponsor. This is her support network. Her mother, if she is still alive, your mother, her sisters, and her trusted female neighbors, all under the direction of the village midwife, the same wise woman who may have treated your infected hand. This circle of women takes over, boiling water, preparing rags, and murmuring words of encouragement and prayer. It's a powerful, communal event, but historians still argue about the dual nature of this circle. Was it a purely supportive sisterhood, offering unconditional help and comfort? Or was it also a forum for social judgment, where the way a woman handled the pain, her screams and her courage, would be noted and discussed later, cementing her reputation in the village. Inside the hovel, your spouse is in a battle. The pain is immense, and it goes on for hours, sometimes for days. There are no anesthetics, no painkillers beyond a sip of ale or prayer. The midwife's tools are her hands, her experience, and her knowledge of herbs. The greatest dangers are invisible. The biggest killer is puerperal fever, an infection of the wound that can set in after the birth, introduced by an unwashed hand or a contaminated cloth. It is a death sentence that arrives a few days after the supposed triumph of survival. Another killer is exhaustion, or a sudden, unstoppable hemorrhage. If the baby is breech or the labor becomes obstructed, there is almost nothing the midwife can do but pray. This is why childbirth is a leading cause of death for women. Every time a woman in your village gives birth, she is staring death directly in the face. You, pacing outside, hear the screams and the prayers. You feel a helplessness so profound it's nauseating. Your physical strength, the thing your entire life is built upon, is useless here. You can plow a field, you can lift a sack of grain, but you cannot intervene in this sacred, terrifying struggle between life and death happening just a few feet away. Then, a new sound cuts through the air, the thin, wavering cry of a newborn. A wave of relief washes over you, so intense it makes your knees weak. But the crisis is not over. The midwife's attention is now on the infant. It is small, fragile, and gasping in the cold, smoky air. Its chances of survival are terrifyingly slim. If the baby appears weak, if it seems unlikely to survive its first few minutes, the midwife's training kicks in with a strange and urgent priority. This brings us to a quirky, poignant historical fact: the emergency baptism. Midwives were often granted special permission by the church to perform a baptism in dire circumstances. Saving the infant's immortal soul from the stain of original sin was considered far more important than saving its mortal life. If the baby is failing, the midwife will abandon her attempts to revive it, grab whatever water is at hand, even the murky water from the cooking pot, and perform the rite herself, reciting the Latin words she was taught for just such an occasion. In nomine Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti, ego te baptizo. I baptize you in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. But your child, this time, is strong enough. The cry grows louder. The immediate danger passes. The gossips clean the infant and wrap it in swaddling clothes. They tend to your spouse, who is pale and utterly drained, but alive. The circle of women slowly disperses, leaving your new, larger family unit in the quiet of the hovel. The air is filled with the smell of blood and birth, and with a fragile, temporary peace. You have passed through the eye of the needle. But as you look at this tiny, new person, and at your exhausted partner, you know that the danger has not ended. It has simply entered a new phase. The battle for this new life has only just begun. The tiny, fragile creature in your hovel is a miracle. But in your world, miracles are not endpoints. They are the starting pistol for the next grueling race. Your newborn has survived the perilous journey into the world, but now faces a gauntlet that will claim half of all children before they reach adolescence. This is not a pessimistic guess. It is a mainstream historical fact, a brutal statistical reality that shapes every aspect of your family life. You do not count your children until they have proven they can survive. Looking at this new life, you know the odds are, at best, 50-50. For the first few months, the baby lives its life as a tightly bound parcel. This is the quirky and universal practice of swaddling. You wrap the infant from neck to toe in long strips of linen or wool, pinning its arms to its sides and its legs straight. The official belief is that this helps the limbs grow strong and true, preventing deformity. The practical reality is that a swaddled baby is an immobilized baby. It's easier to manage, less likely to scratch itself, and, most importantly, it can be put down in a corner or hung from a hook on the wall, safely contained while your spouse gets on with the endless work of the household. It is a baby straitjacket, a device of convenience born from the absolute necessity of uninterrupted labor. The baby's only source of food is its mother's milk. This is its best defense, passing on a sliver of her immunity. If your spouse were to die, or if her milk failed, the baby's chances would plummet. A wet nurse is a luxury for the nobility. For you, there is no alternative. The most dangerous transition in a young life is weaning. When the child is finally introduced to solid food, it is the same coarse, gritty pottage and dark bread that you eat, washed down with the same contaminated water from the well. This is when the diarrheal diseases, the dreaded bloody flux, often strike. A bout of dysentery can dehydrate and kill a small child in a matter of days. You watch, helpless, feeding them sips of water and praying as their small bodies are racked with sickness. Your hovel, the only home you have, is a minefield of other dangers. The open hearth fire that keeps you warm can deliver a fatal burn in a split second of inattention. The animals you share your space with can kick or trample. And the air itself, thick with wood smoke, lodges deep in small lungs, leading to endless coughs and respiratory infections that can turn into pneumonia overnight. The common illnesses of childhood are not rites of passage, they are potential death sentences. Measles, mumps, diphtheria, scarlet fever, they sweep through the village, and you pray they pass over your door. This crushing reality of child mortality leads to a sad, difficult question that historians still debate. Did you and your spouse practice a kind of emotional self-defense, a sort of effective indifference? Did you hold back your love, refusing to get too attached to a child who was so likely to be taken from you? It's a bleak thought, but perhaps a necessary one to preserve your own sanity in the face of repeated, unimaginable loss. You might watch your infant with a calculated distance, telling yourself not to invest too deeply. Not yet. But then the baby grips your finger with its tiny, perfect hand, or gives a gummy, toothless smile, and the floodgates of your heart open against your will. You realize then that the theory is wrong. The love is total and terrifying, and the fear of loss is not a dull ache, but a sharp, constant companion. The grief, when it comes, is not smaller for being common. It is a vast, gaping wound that your society simply expects you to bear in silence. If your child defies the odds and survives these first treacherous years, their childhood does not resemble anything we would recognize. The modern idea of a long, protected age of innocence and play is a foreign concept. Childhood is an apprenticeship for adulthood, and it starts early. By the age of 5 or 6, your son or daughter is already a contributing member of the family's workforce. Their tasks are simple, but vital. They are sent to gather firewood from the forest edge, to fetch buckets of water, to watch the geese, or to spend their days in the fields scaring away the crows with a wooden clapper. Their small hands are put to use weeding the garden or picking stones from the family strips of land. Play exists, of course, simple games with stones or sticks, rough and tumble wrestling, but it happens in the slivers of time between chores. The primary purpose of their young life is to learn the skills they will need to survive, And those skills are all rooted in labor. By the time your child is 10, they are working alongside you in the fields during the harvest, their small body straining to keep up. There is no school, no books, no upward mobility. There is only the endless cycle of the seasons and the work that each demands. You look at your surviving child, a 10-year-old veteran of disease and toil, and you do not see a carefree kid. You see a survivor. Their existence is a testament not to a gentle upbringing, but to a brutal process of natural selection that played out on the floor of your own home. You look at your surviving child, a small, tough veteran of a brutal world, and you are filled with a fierce, protective love. You think of the other children you have lost, the small, unmarked graves in the churchyard. How do you make sense of a world of such casual cruelty, where life is so fragile and suffering is so constant? You have no philosophy books, no science, no access to the world's collected knowledge. You have only one source of answers, one framework for your entire reality. It stands in the center of your village, made of stone while all else is wood and mud. The church. Its power over your life is absolute, and it begins with the very measurement of time itself. You do not know that today is the 6th of July. That is a meaningless concept. For you, time is marked by the life of Christ and His saints. It is the 5th Sunday after Trinity. It is the week of the feast of Saint Benedict. Your sense of the year is not a string of numbered days, but a great, repeating wheel of holy seasons, and its turning dictates everything you do. The only clock you have ever known is the church bell. It is the village's heartbeat. Its tolling from the bell tower marks the hours of prayer for the monks and the priest, matins, lauds, prime, and in doing so, it tells you when to get up, when to go to the fields, when to take your midday meal, and when to trudge home. The bell is your timekeeper, your boss, and your conscience, all rolled into one. Your week revolves around Sunday. It is a day of rest, commanded by God, which means a welcome break from your labor on the Lord's land, that your own animals still need to be fed and your spouse's work in the hovel never truly stops. The center of the day is Massachusetts. Your attendance is not optional. To miss Mass without a life-threatening excuse is to invite the wrath of the priest and the suspicion of your neighbors. You file into the dark, cool interior of the church, a space that awes you with its height and its permanence. The air smells of damp stone, melting beeswax, and the sweet, lingering ghost of incense. You cannot understand the priest's words during the Mass itself. It is all in Latin, the mysterious language of God and the educated. But you can see the story in the crude, colorful paintings on the walls. There you see Adam and Eve being cast out of a garden, a reminder of why your life is one of toil. You see the terrifying images of Judgment Day, with demons dragging the damned into a fiery hell mouth. And you might see a popular and powerful image of the harrowing of hell. This was a beloved, non-biblical story, a quirky add-on to the Easter narrative, where Christ, after his crucifixion, descends into the underworld like a hero, breaks down the gates of hell, and liberates the souls of the righteous who died before his time. This image of a powerful, triumphant Christ smashing down gates and freeing the trapped resonates with you far more than any complex theology. The most important part of the service for you is the sermon. Here, the priest speaks in your own tongue, and he explains God's plan. It is here you learn of the three estates, the divine and unchangeable social order. This is a core fact of your world. God has divided humanity into three groups with different jobs: the orators, those who pray, like the priest and the monks; the bellators, those who fight, like your Lord and his knights; and the laborators, those who work. That's you. Your job, your sacred duty, is to toil and produce the food and wealth that supports the other two estates. It is a powerful message. It transforms your endless, grinding labor from a miserable burden into a holy obligation. Your suffering has a purpose. The whole year is structured this way. It begins with Advent, the quiet, somber waiting for Christmas. Then comes Christmastide, a dozen days of relative feasting and rest. After that, the year falls into the long, cold slog toward Lent, a 40-day period of fasting and penitence before Easter. For you, the Lenten fast isn't a huge sacrifice. You rarely eat meat or eggs anyway, but it adds a layer of pious gloom to the time of year when your food stores are already at their lowest. Easter is the year's great climax, a joyful celebration of resurrection that coincides with the return of spring and life to the fields. This constant rhythm of feast and fast, of penitence and celebration, raises a question historians still debate. Was all this for you, or was it for them? Was the church's grip on your time and your mind a tool of social control, a brilliant system to keep you obedient, productive, and resigned to your fate? Or was it a source of genuine, popular faith, a system that you and your neighbors embraced because it gave your brutal lives meaning, community, and the hope of a better world to come? Like most things, it is probably both. You fear the priest and the fires of hell he describes so vividly, but the church is also the heart of your community, and the promise of heaven is the only thing that makes the loss of a child bearable. The church owns time. It owns the explanation for your suffering, and it owns the promise of your salvation. By framing your life as a brief, painful trial on the path to an eternal reward, it makes your acceptance of the status quo not just a practical necessity, but a moral virtue. You keep your head down, you do your work, you say your prayers, and you endure. That is God's will. But the church's grip on time is not just a mechanism for demanding piety and obedience. The great wheel of the liturgical year, for all its solemnity and seasons of fasting, is also studded with bright, chaotic moments of release. These are the holy days, the origin of our modern word, holiday, and they are your only reprieve from the endless cycle of toil. On these days, the Lord's work stops. The reeve does not hound you. You are granted a temporary, precious freedom from servitude, a chance to remember that you are more than just a beast of burden. There are dozens of these days scattered throughout the year. Every Sunday is a small holiday, but the major festivals are what you truly live for. They are beacons of light in the long, dark tunnels of work. Christmas is not just a single day, but a 12-day marathon of celebration called Christmastide, a welcome hibernation in the dead of winter. Easter marks the joyous end of the lean, grim weeks of Lent. And then there are the festivals with even older, wilder roots, holidays that the church cleverly absorbed rather than trying to extinguish. May Day, with its towering maypole and celebration of the earth's fertility, and Midsummer's Eve, the feast of St. John the Baptist, where the entire village stays up all night around a roaring bonfire, its pagan soul thinly veiled by a Christian saint's name. This syncretism is a core feature of your festive life. You celebrate Christ's birth by lighting a Yule log, a tradition far older than your church. On the morning of a festival, the very air in the village feels different. The usual sense of weary resignation is replaced by a thrum of giddy anticipation. You wear your one good tunic, the one that's slightly less stained and patched than your work clothes. The sounds are different too. Instead of the rhythmic thud of an axe or the lowing of oxen, you hear the cheerful, reedy music of a pipe and tabor, and the rising sound of laughter. The Lord, and a calculated display of generosity that also functions as a powerful tool of control, might provide a feast for his tenants. For one day, the pottage pot is ignored. You are given a trencher of bread piled high with roasted pork or goose, meat so rich and fatty it makes your head swim. And, most importantly, you are given ale. This isn't the weak, watery, small ale you drink to avoid dying of dysentery. This is the good stuff, strong and dark and brewed for celebration. It flows freely, and the social rules that govern your life are relaxed. Drunkenness is not a failing, it's practically a requirement. The ale loosens your tongue and lightens your spirit. For a few hours, you can forget the debt, the damp, and the despair. The highlight of the Christmas feast might be the appointment of a Lord of Misrule. This is a truly quirky and wonderful tradition. A commoner, maybe one of your loud-mouthed and funny neighbors, is crowned the mock king of the festivities. For the duration of the feast, his word is law. He presides over the chaos, leading songs, organizing games, and demanding absurd tributes. His greatest delight, and yours, is ordering around the powerful. He can make the stern reeve sing a bawdy song, or demand the Lord's wife serve him a cup of ale. It is a world turned upside down, a brief, hilarious parody of the power structure you live under every other day of the year. The festivities often spill outside into rough, chaotic sports. You might take part in a wrestling match or an archery contest with a goose as the prize. The most popular sport is a village-wide game that barely resembles its modern namesake, medieval football. The ball is an inflated pig's bladder. The goals might be the church door at one end of the village and the mill at the other. There are no teams, no boundaries, and seemingly no rules beyond. Get the bladder to the goal by any means necessary. It is a sprawling, muddy, joyous riot that can involve dozens, or even hundreds, of people shoving, kicking, and brawling their way through the village streets. These fleeting holidays lead historians to a debate. What was their real function? Were they a crucial social safety valve, a way for the authorities to let you blow off steam in a controlled environment to prevent your frustrations from boiling over into actual rebellion? Or were they genuinely subversive moments, where community bonds were forged in the shared chaos, and the authority of the church and manor was temporarily weakened by mockery and licensed misrule? As you leap through the smoke of the midsummer bonfire for good luck, or find yourself laughing until your sides ache at the Lord of Misrule, you don't think about the theory. You just feel, for a moment, alive and free. But the moment always ends. The sun rises on the following day. Your head is pounding from the ale, your body is bruised from the football game, and the reeve is at the edge of the village, waiting. The holiday is over. The brief, bright spark is extinguished, and you are back to the cold, gray reality of your life. These festivals do not change your fundamental condition, but they make it survivable. They are the punctuation marks in a long, monotonous sentence of toil, and the memory of them is a flickering candle you carry through the darkness. The memory of the festival, with its light and noise and laughter, fades as you return to your routine. It becomes a small, warm ember in your mind. But as you go about your work at the edge of the manor, where your family's strips of land run up against the great forest, you are reminded of the boundary of your world. The village, with its church bell, its familiar hovels, and its oppressive but predictable social order, is the known world. The forest is something else entirely. It is a place of absolute necessity and absolute terror, a dark, breathing entity that you both need and fear. You step into the woods, perhaps to gather fallen branches for your fire, a rite known as Estover. The change is immediate and startling. The bright, open sky is gone, replaced by a dense green canopy that swallows the light. The sounds of the village, a distant hammer, a dog barking, are muffled and die away, replaced by the whisper of wind in the leaves and the unnerving rustle of unseen things in the undergrowth. You are only 100 paces from the fields, but you feel as if you have crossed a border into another realm. This forest is your supplemental larder. Here you can forage for mushrooms, a dangerous game of knowing the difference between dinner and a painful death, as well as nuts in the autumn and wild berries in the summer. If you have a pig, you might pay the Lord a fee for pannage, the right to let it roam here and fatten itself on acorns. The forest provides things your meager garden plot cannot. But it is also a place of very real, physical dangers. Tales abound of travelers getting lost and wandering for days, only to be found dead of exposure. And the woods have teeth. While wolves are a threat, a far more common and aggressive danger is the wild boar, a powerful, tusked beast that can disembowel a man with a single, furious charge. Beyond the animals, there are the other men. The forest is the natural home of outlaws, bandits, and desperate men who live outside the Lord's law. They could rob you for the very shoes on your feet or the clothes on your back. But even these threats pale in comparison to the forest's legal guardians, the Lord's foresters. The forest is the Lord's private hunting reserve, and a separate, much harsher set of rules known as forest law applies here. This is a mainstream historical fact that you understand viscerally. It is designed to protect the vert and the venison, the greenery and the game animals. You are here to gather fallen wood. If a forester catches you cutting a live branch, you will be fined heavily. If he catches you setting a snare for a rabbit, you could be flogged or have a hand cut off. If you are caught trying to hunt one of the Lord's precious deer, the penalty could be death. The deer are better protected by the law than you are. This rational fear is layered with a deeper, more ancient dread. The church teaches that the village is God's territory, sanctified by the church bell. The deep woods, by contrast, are the devil's playground. This is where demons and evil spirits hold sway, or they can lead a good Christian astray. But your fear is older than that. It's filled with figures from the folklore your grandmother whispered to you by the fire. Goblins, sprites, and fairies, not the gentle, winged creatures of later stories, but tricksters, dangerous and capricious beings who might steal a baby, curse your cow, or lead you into a bog with a flickering light. You walk carefully, your eyes scanning the gnarled trees that look like hunched old men. You might even take a deliberately winding path, because you know that a cork's road, one of the invisible straight lines the spirits of the dead travel along, runs through this part of the woods, and to block a spirit's path is to invite a haunting. This leads to a debate historians have. Was your fear of the forest primarily a practical one, rooted in the real dangers of outlaws and foresters? Or was it a supernatural terror, a cultural inheritance of folklore and religious teaching? You feel both at once. The forester is a more likely threat, but the idea of the goblin feels deeper, more primal. The fear of the man with the crossbow and the fear of the creature with the glowing eyes get tangled together until the forest itself feels like a single, malevolent entity. As the sun begins to dip below the treetops, the woods transform again. The shadows lengthen and merge, and every rustle sounds like a footstep, every bird call like a warning. You hoist your bundle of firewood onto your back and hurry, your heart pounding, toward the fading light at the edge of the trees. When you finally break free from the woods and step back into the open fields, The sense of relief is overwhelming. You see the familiar shapes of the village hovels, hear the comforting, rhythmic toll of the Vespers bell from the church tower, and you feel like a traveler returning from a dangerous foreign land. The forest is always there, on the horizon of your life, a constant, dark reminder of the chaos and wildness that your small, hard-won, and miserable world holds at bay. You feel a profound relief returning to the village from the dark woods, a sense of safety in the familiar routines and the predictable landscape of the manor. But this security is a fragile illusion, as thin as a winter coat. Your greatest enemy is not the wolf in the forest or the demon in the folktales. It is the sky. Your entire existence is balanced on a knife's edge, and the weather determines which way you fall. One bad season, 1 year where the heavens turn against you, is all it takes to plunge your world into the nightmare of famine. It begins with the rain. A gentle spring shower is a blessing, but this is different. It starts in late spring and it never stops. Day after day, a cold, relentless drizzle soaks the fields, turning your neat furrows into channels of mud. The sun is a pale, distant memory. Your crops, which should be reaching for the sky, are stunted and yellow, drowning in the soil. The hay you need to feed your animals through the winter lies rotting and blackening in the meadows. A cold dread begins to settle over the village, a fear that you try not to speak aloud. The harvest is a catastrophe. You bring in a fraction of what you need to survive. The grain is damp and mildewed. But the Lord's reef still comes, as he always does. He inspects your meager pile, his face impassive, and takes the Lord's share. The fact that you will now starve is not his concern. He is taking a percentage of the yield, and he takes it without pity. After the church has taken its tithe, the pile of grain left for your family is so small it makes you want to weep. It will not last until Christmas. The first few months are a slow, grinding descent into hunger. You ration every mouthful. The daily pottage becomes thinner, more watery. The dark, heavy bread you once found so monotonous is now a precious treasure. Soon, it is all gone. The gnawing emptiness in your stomach becomes a constant, physical pain. You slaughter your last few chickens. Then the family pig. The brief feast from the meat feels like a betrayal, because you know that with every animal you kill to survive today, you are slaughtering your chances of surviving tomorrow. The final, unthinkable sacrifice is your cow, your partner in labor, your family's greatest asset. Her meat feeds you for a few weeks, but now your ability to work the land next year is gone. You have begun to eat your own future. When the animals are gone, you turn back to the forest, the place of fear, now your only hope. You dig for roots, peel bark from trees, and gather acorns, which you know are poisonous unless you painstakingly boil them multiple times to leach out the bitter tannins. You grind these into a coarse, foul-tasting flour to make a crude, famine bread that feels like swallowing sawdust and dirt. This is desperation dining. As the hunger deepens, it brings a friend, disease. Your body, starved of nutrients, has no strength to fight off sickness. A simple cold becomes a deadly respiratory infection. The contaminated water that your body could once handle now ravages your insides, causing the bloody flux. This is the great debate for historians who study these events. Did people in a famine die primarily of starvation, the literal lack of calories? Or did they die of the epidemic diseases that feasted on their weakened bodies? For you, the distinction is meaningless. Your neighbor withers away from hunger, his wife dies of a hacking cough. The end result is the same. The village becomes a house of ghosts. Your grandparents spoke of a time like this, a story told in hushed, terrified tones, the Great Famine of 1315. For 3 years the rains fell, and the whole of northern Europe starved. They said millions died, that people abandoned their villages in droves, that the bonds of society completely dissolved. You always thought it was an exaggeration, a dark fairy tale. Now you know it was a memory. The social fabric of your village, the community that celebrated and mourned together, shreds and disintegrates. Trust evaporates. Every neighbor is a rival and a zero-sum game of survival. A missing tool, a raided garden plot, suspicion turns to accusation, and accusation to violence. Meanwhile, you look up at the Lord's castle, where smoke still rises from the kitchens. His granaries are full from the good harvests of previous years. He is not starving. He is warm. He is safe. The bitterness you feel is a cold, hard knot in your empty gut, a hatred that you are too weak to act upon. You are trapped, abandoned by God and your master. As you huddle with your starving family in the cold, dark hovel, you realize the ultimate horror of your existence. You are utterly, completely, and fatally on your own. Somehow, you endure the famine. The rains eventually stop, the sun returns, and a meager crop allows you to claw your way back from the brink. The ghosts of the dead haunt the village, a permanent reminder of how close you came to utter annihilation. Just as you think the world can take nothing more from you, you learn that nature's cruelty is no match for man's. A traveling merchant or a grim-faced priest brings the news. The king is at war with a neighboring kingdom over some incomprehensible dispute about a distant duchy or a royal marriage. To you, it is meaningless noise, a quarrel among the great lords that has nothing to do with your life. You are wrong. Their wars are always fought on your land and paid for with your blood. The first sign of trouble is the arrival of a friendly army. Your own lord, answering the king's call to arms, marches his men through your village. These soldiers, your supposed protectors, are a plague in themselves. They operate under the principle of purveyance, the right to seize whatever they need to wage war. They empty your already paltry grain stores, take your animals for meat, and drain your barrels of ale. They call it requisitioning, but without payment, it feels exactly like theft. Worse, the Lord's sergeants may come looking for able-bodied men. You could be levied, handed a simple spear or a longbow if you have some skill, and marched away from your family to fight as a foot soldier. You are not a knight in shining armor. You are peasant infantry, the most expendable piece on the board, and your chances of returning are slim. But that is not the worst that can happen. The tide of war is fickle. A few months later, a new rumor spreads, one that sends a wave of pure terror through the village. The enemy is coming. They have crossed the border and are heading this way. Panic sets in. There is no army here to protect you. Your lord and his men are off fighting somewhere else. You are completely exposed. Frantically, you try to hide what little you have. You might have a small, secret cellar dug beneath the floor of your hovel, a hiding hole just big enough for a few precious items. Into it you place your one iron cooking pot, the axe your father gave you, and the tiny sack of seed grain you were saving for the spring planting. It's a pathetic treasure, but it is all you have in the world. You and your family flee, joining the stream of refugees from other villages, making for the relative safety of the woods you have always feared. From a high ridge, you watch the apocalypse descend upon your home. This is not a battle. It is a military tactic, a mainstream and brutal feature of medieval warfare known as a chevauchée. A column of enemy soldiers on horseback, their armor glinting in the sun, rides through your manor with the sole purpose of destroying it. They are not trying to conquer the land, but to break its economic back, to terrorize its people, and to prove that your Lord cannot protect you. You watch in horror as they ride through the half-grown fields, their horses trampling the green shoots that promise to save you from another famine. They put their torches to the thatched roofs of the hovels and the homes of your neighbors, and then your own, erupt in flames. The smoke billows into the sky, thick and black. Historians still argue about the primary purpose of such tactics. Was it purely strategic, designed to bankrupt your Lord and deny him the resources to continue fighting? Or was it psychological, a message of terror intended to crush morale? As you watch your entire world burn, the academic distinction feels obscene. You only know the hatred and the helplessness that consumes you. The soldiers are like locusts. They rout up any remaining livestock for their own provisions, or kill them for sport. They smash what they cannot carry. The order and rhythm of your village is replaced by the chaos of violent, armed men who see you, and everything you own is less than nothing. After a day, they are gone, a distant plume of dust on the horizon, on their way to inflict the same casual horror on the next village. When you finally dare to creep back, the silence is the most shocking thing. The village is a smoldering ruin. The fields are scarred and trampled. The hovels are blackened skeletons. Your home is gone. You frantically dig at the floor of the ruin, your hands raw, until you find the hiding hole. Your pot is there. Your axe is there. The precious seed grain is safe. You clutch the small sack to your chest and tears stream down your smoke-stained face. The famine scoured your bodies and your community, but this war has scoured the land itself. It has erased your past and your present. Holding this tiny, pathetic sack of seeds, you are left with the impossible task of trying to build a future on a field of ashes. You rebuild. After the soldiers leave and the ashes cool, you and the other survivors begin the painstaking process of putting your world back together. You raise new timbers for your hovel. You use your precious saved seeds to plant a new crop. The work is harder than ever, your community is smaller, and the ghosts of the past are everywhere. But life, with its stubborn, relentless rhythm, continues. For a few years, a fragile peace settles. You dare to hope that you have finally seen the worst the world can throw at you. Then, a new kind of rumor begins to snake its way through the land. It comes from the sea, from the great port cities of Italy, carried by pilgrims and traders. They speak of a pestilence, a new sickness so swift and so deadly it makes all other diseases look like a common cold. They say it leaves black swellings on the skin and kills a man in 3 days. You hear these stories, but they feel distant, unreal. It is someone else's problem. Then it is not. It arrives in your village not with a clash of swords or a crack of thunder, but in silence. A traveler falls ill at the small inn. A few days later, a shepherd who shared a drink with him develops a raging fever. The next morning, his wife finds him dead, his skin covered in dark splotches and a grotesque, purple swelling, a bubo the size of an apple in his groin. The terror that descends upon your village is a new species of fear. Famine was a slow grind. War was a terrifying but understandable violence. This is an invisible, silent, and seemingly unstoppable enemy. It feels like witchcraft. It feels like the wrath of God himself. Soon, others fall sick. You learn to recognize the signs, the sudden fever and chills, the vomiting, the delirium. Most terrifying of all are the buboes, the swollen lymph nodes in the neck, armpits, and groin that are the disease's calling card. This is the Black Death, a pandemic caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, a historical fact that will not be known for another 500 years. All you know is that if a loved one shows the swellings, they are almost certainly dead already. And it spreads with terrifying speed. Sometimes a person dies so quickly in a single night that the buboes don't even have time to form. Other times, the sickness goes into the lungs, and the victim can spread it to everyone around them with a single cough. All the systems you rely on for meaning and comfort collapse. The wise woman's herbs are useless. The priest's prayers go unanswered. He leads a procession through the village, begging for God's mercy, and a week later he himself is dead. The church bells that once marked the hours now toll a constant, frantic funeral dirge, until the bell ringer dies and they fall silent altogether. The social order, which seemed so rigid and eternal, dissolves into dust. The bonds of family, the most sacred fortress in your life, are the first casualty. Fear of contagion overwhelms love. You hear stories of parents abandoning their sick children, of husbands fleeing from their wives. You see it yourself when your neighbor, finding his eldest son with a bubo, boards up the door to his own hovel from the outside, sacrificing his family to try and save himself. You are faced with an impossible choice. Do you care for a sick loved one and invite death into your home? Or do you flee and live with the shame? One day, a strange procession passes on the road near your village. It is a group of flagellants, dozens of them, stripped to the waist, marching in two lines. They chant prayers while whipping their own backs with leather scourges tipped with iron, their skin a mass of bleeding wounds. They are religious fanatics who believe that by performing this extreme, public penance, they can atone for the sins of mankind and convince God to lift the plague. You watch them, horrified and fascinated. They are a symptom of the world's madness, a sign that everything is come undone. Historians and demographers still argue about the precise toll of the Black Death, but they agree it killed a staggering portion of Europe's population, perhaps a third, perhaps half, or even more. The impact varied wildly. Some villages were wiped out entirely, left as silent collections of huts where the dead outnumbered the living. Others, through sheer luck, were spared. You don't know the statistics. You only know that every morning you wake up and listen. The silence where a rooster should have crowed, the silence from a neighboring hovel where a baby used to cry, these are the sounds of the plague. You, your spouse, your children, you huddle together in your hut, checking your own bodies constantly for the first sign of a swelling. Every itch, every headache, every touch of fever sends a jolt of pure terror through you. You have survived poverty, filth, sickness, famine, and war. But this, you fear, is the apocalypse. This is the end of the world. The plague, like a great tide, finally recedes. It leaves behind a world that is eerily quiet, unnervingly empty. The village is a place of ghosts. Half the hovels are vacant, their former inhabitants buried in a great pit in the churchyard. You are a survivor. You walk through the fire of the apocalypse and, by some combination of luck and fortitude, you emerge on the other side. But you are not the same. Every joint in your body aches with a deep, permanent weariness. The lines on your face, carved by sun and sorrow, feel deeper than ever. You have survived, but you have grown old. In your world, old age is not a number. You don't know if you're 50 or 55. You have never celebrated a birthday. Old age is a physical state, a verdict delivered by your own body. It arrives the day you can no longer keep up with the plow, the day your back gives out for good, the day your hands become too gnarled and stiff to properly grip an axe. There is no peaceful retirement, no reward for a lifetime of labor. You are expected to work until you can work no more, your tasks diminishing along with your strength. You move from the fields to the garden, from the garden to a stool by the fire, mending tools or rocking a grandchild. You must contribute something, anything, lest you become just another mouth to feed. You look out at the changed world. With so many dead, the land lies fallow and laborers are scarce. For your surviving children, there are new opportunities. The lords are forced to offer better terms, to pay wages for work, to let the old bonds of serfdom begin to fray. Historians will look back on this time in a debate if it was a golden age for the European peasant. On one hand, there is more land and better pay. On the other, there is the profound trauma of the plague and the fierce resistance of the nobility, who try to pass laws to freeze wages and put the peasantry back in its place. You don't see a golden age. You see the faces of the dead. You are too haunted and too tired to feel the dawn. Your greatest fear now is becoming a burden. You watch your son, now a man, manage the strips of land that were once yours. You see his wife, struggling to feed their own children. You eat your portion of the pottage with a sense of guilt, knowing how precious each spoonful is. The mainstream historical fact of your era is the brutal life expectancy. At birth, it was perhaps 35, a number dragged down by the oceans of dead infants. But even for you, a survivor of childhood, of famine, of war, of plague, reaching 60 is a monumental achievement. You are an ancient, weathered landmark in a landscape of the young. Then, one day, a familiar chill sets in your bones, but this time it is different. A cough settles deep in your chest and will not leave. You grow weak. You know, with the calm certainty of a lifetime of hardship, that this is your final illness. You take to your straw pallet for the last time. As you lie there, in the familiar smoky dimness of your hovel, you prepare for one last struggle. A popular belief, illustrated in the art of dying books the priests read, holds that the deathbed is a final battlefield. Demons, invisible to everyone else, gather around you to offer temptations. The demon of pride reminds you that you survived the plague when so many others perished. The demon of avarice whispers that your son is not worthy of the single axe you have to leave him. You must fight them. The angels are there, too, urging you to have faith, to confess, to accept your end with humility. Your last moments are not a peaceful fading, but an active, spiritual combat. Your life spools out behind your eyes. The endless, aching toil in the fields. The bland, repetitive taste of pottage. The sour warmth of ale at a festival. The terror of the Lord's reeve. The face of your spouse, young and strong on your wedding day. The small, warm weight of your newborn child in your arms. The black boils on a neighbor's skin. The smell of your burning home. The faces of your children, living and dead. It has been a life of profound suffering, punctuated by the smallest, most desperate joys. It has been hard. It has been brutal. And now, it is over. You take one last, rattling breath, and the smoke and the shadows of the hovel finally fade to black,